pursue one point that was addressed by all three of you, which is we are addressing three different religious traditions at one point. And I'm sensing some differences over whether these fundamentally are the same or very similar religions with similar approaches to broader moral ethical questions, or I've heard a couple of you suggest that these are very diverse approaches. Can you say more about that? I'd like to know the nature of where each of you is coming from on this, and whether when you're talking about diversity, if you believe there's a diversity of approaches to the large ethical questions that face all human beings, does diversity also underlie that one of these is a better approach, or has a better approach than the other two? We'll start with Sean and go back.
Yeah, I think that religious traditions, and here again I want to emphasize the particularity even within any given religious tradition. But I think religious traditions do come with different worldviews. And that in trying to identify the one thing they have in common, one has a tendency to impose one religious tradition's worldview on the others. And so, for example, to follow up on Storm's point, I think various traditions define the human problem differently. And I think, therefore, provide a different basis for the collective endeavor that is ethical deliberation. Because how you define the problem makes a big difference in how you think human beings have to address that problem in the doing of ethics. Now, here I'll show, I may not be in the philosophy department, but I'll show sort of my philosophical card, which is I tend to be a pragmatist. And so in terms of talking about better and worse, I guess my tendency would begin a conversation to say, well, which definition of the human problem gets us somewhere that we need to be going in terms of contemporary ethical challenges. I don't think I would fundamentally rank one over another, but I think some have better outcomes than others do.
Okay. Sure.
Yeah, I think I'm guilty of what you say, Sean, in terms of sort of understanding the basic human problem from my own, in this case, religious perspective. And I don't think it's fair for me to characterize all religions as aiming at the same thing. At least if I get too specific about that.
Yeah.
But I do think that we can talk to each other, that is to say, between various traditions or within traditions, in meaningful ways. Which is to say, let's say if some other religious tradition or some other person in my own tradition doesn't hold the same sort of sense of priorities as me or the same characterization of the fundamental human problem, that doesn't mean that that doesn't mean that we can't talk about that person's version or my person's version. That is to say, I'm really interested, and I'm not a pragmatist in the sense that I'm really interested in the truth claims of religious traditions. And I'm really only interested in religion insofar, I mean, it has all kinds of sort of social functions and all kinds of stuff like that. I have to confess, I'm just not terribly interested in that. I'm interested in what's true, ultimately, about persons and the world. And different religions make different claims about that. And so if I say, this is the fundamental human problem, right, a sin conceived in a certain sort of way, well, I'm either right about that or wrong about that. I mean, we have to do some work to make sure we're not talking past one another. But I do think that that's a question about the objective state of the universe. And while we can't be certain about any answers to it, I think we can reason about that, and I think we can talk about that. So I'm really interested in sort of, and I do think that at some level, there is a conception that the human race is not doing just fine. that there's a problem, and that somehow or another, insofar as we're going to bring religion in to a conversation about ethics and the good, I still think that's its most significant goal. Have I done your thing about you? Okay.
Awesome. Okay, Loyal.
Well, I like Sean's point about emphasizing the diversity within various traditions. I think that's something that's easily overlooked. We can say, there's Christianity and there's Judaism, and we overlook the fact that there are lots of Christianities and lots of Judaisms. Well, not so many Judaisms, but lots of Buddhisms and lots of Hinduism and so on, and that's really important. But that doesn't undo the fact that Islam, Judaism, and Christianity are all three examples of ethical monotheism, all of which operate on the principle that the thing to do is God's will. Diversity in religious traditions, and is one better than another? It's my view that all the religious traditions I've come up against, I don't come up against them, all the religious traditions that I've come up against, I guess I do. Religious traditions I know anything about have really the same agenda. They want to transform us. They want to change us. They want to affect the way we live. And I can't think of any that are not focused, at least in substantial part, on the problem of the individual self, the ego. Buddhism handles this by saying there is no self. Christianity handles this by saying die to the old self and be born to the new self. And various traditions have different vocabularies for talking about this, but they're all after basically the same thing. That is making us better people, transforming the way we live so that we aren't so selfish, so that we in fact recognize that there are some things that are more excellent, more beautiful, and more enduring than we are. That is, we shouldn't take ourselves so seriously as individuals. And I think they're all in that business. Now, does one do it better than the others? Yes. Yes. That's the one that does it, right? And so if Christianity doesn't do it for you, move on. Over to Buddhism, see if that does it. Move on, if that doesn't do it, to some place where, in fact, you are made to see that there are things more beautiful, more excellent, and more enduring than you are yourself. And that seems to me is a kind of pragmatism. I'm interested in that transformative function. You don't like functions, you like truth. I like functions. I don't like truth. I mean, truth seems to me... truth. You know about the La Brea tar pits, right? That's the place where they found a bunch of extinct animals. Truth at the bottom of the La Brea tar pits isn't worth much when you think about it. So I'm more for transformation and adaptivity.